Hello and welcome to the November monthly webinar. My name is Mike Kramer. I am the Calibration Inspection Program Manager, and I am presenting today on behalf of Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation, ISO IEC 17025, 2017. We're going to look at Section 710, Non-Conforming Work, and also small section 8.6 on improvements. So once again, welcome and thank you for logging in today. As always, this webinar is being recorded at the PJLA website at the conclusion of this webinar. If perhaps you want to re-listen to it, or if perhaps a colleague has missed it and would like to listen, by all means, feel free to connect at the PJLA website and follow the webinar tab. Currently, everybody is muted. If you have any questions, please utilize the question tab on your screen. Please keep questions in regards to today's topic. And then at the end of the session, I'll be able to go back and review and hopefully answer all the questions that have been submitted. So the first section we're going to look at is section 710, non-conforming work. So non-conforming work, so what are we referring to here? Is section 710 in the 17025 standard. So this is non-conforming testing or calibration work, and this would occur if any aspects of the organization's testing or calibration or the results of this work do not conform to the organization's own procedures or the agreed requirements of the customers. Non-conforming work can be identified through various sources such as customer complaints, quality control activities, instrument calibrations. Excuse me, I have to cut that off. Instruments calibration, checking of consumable materials, staff observations or supervisions, test reports and calibration certificate reviews. Also can stem from management reviews and internal and external audits. Hence 710, non-conforming work. Often folks, I find during assessments, initial assessments, sort of incorporate this in with corrective action. Now, this is something different. It's got its own section. It may very well lead to the protocol on corrective action being followed. So a non-conformance, again, is a deviation from an established protocol or plan. And these could include such things as failure of resources, such as personnel, equipment, facilities, or work instructions, to meet performance requirements or other specified requirements. Or perhaps a failure of personnel to comply with documented work instructions or operation procedures. Failure of test data to meet required standards due to 1, failure or specified failures to meet all conditions necessary to ensure integrity and representatives of the sample, such as sample histories, deficiencies exist, failures or suspected failures to comply with the test methods, SOP failures, or suspected failures in method performance is demonstrated by results provided by the quality control samples. Inherited property of a sample that compromises the testing, such as verified by the methods of standard additions. So you know, I'm the calibration program manager. I don't do a whole lot with testing, but I do see in often testing protocols in your samples, you may have controlled samples that are worked in there. Things like spikes or blanks, and non-conforming work would be taking appropriate actions to perhaps as a reaction to suspicious results obtained by those quality assurance related activities that you incorporated into your test protocol. Something that I see, I would say, when this procedure needs to be implemented the most is when equipment goes out for calibration. So this could be equipment that are used directly or indirectly in your testing or calibration, perhaps a balance that is used specifically in the weighing, or perhaps a temperature thermometer, hygrometer used to correct for various environmental conditions that exceed. So this is failure of your as found data. So I have here as found is I like to refer to as used. So hence here's an example of a CalCert. Well, we have several as found failures. So this is outside of the specified tolerances. Excuse me. And hence what this means, and that's why I like to refer to it as used, that means the organization that submitted this artifact was actually using this artifact in that condition in producing customers' testing or calibration results. So when this happens, it needs to be evaluated as per these requirements. So basically, you'll see you have to do an impact analysis on any testing or calibration produced for your clients that were incorporated with those as found failures. Ideally, I'm going to get a little bit off a subject here. Intermediate checks for equipment may provide supporting data as to when the equipment was out of tolerance. With no system of intermediate checks in place, for all you know, it could have drifted out of tolerance the day the instrument was received back from the previous calibration, or the day before it was sent back sent out for this particular calibration. So perhaps you have a 1 year interval. If you run your equipment checks on a scheduled basis, maybe once a week, perhaps. Good system of intermediate checks. Ideally, these intermediate checks will find perhaps any drifting of your equipment, or it may be able to pinpoint through your past data when exactly the instrument may have drifted out of tolerance. So well, I just want to elaborate a little bit more on there. So before, if you had nothing in place at all, and it was sent out, say, on a 1 year interval, you'd have to go back that whole year. If you had a good system of intermediate checks in place, ideally, you may be able to catch when it may have drifted and perhaps cut that time down significantly. Ideally, if you really have a good system of intermediate checks and perhaps have good control limits set, then it may have been caught even before the instrument has gone out of tolerance. So we're going to look at the requirements here under 710. So this is one of the requirements that establishes a procedure. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cough, so please excuse me. I'm just getting over, I think, a little bit about with something there. So again, 710.1, the laboratory shall have a procedure that shall be implemented when any aspect of its laboratory activities or results of this work do not conform with its own procedures or the agreed requirements of the customers. Such as environmental conditions are out of specified limits, results of monitoring fails to meet specific criteria. The procedure shall ensure that, so we're going to go through the listing here, but what it's saying here, equipment or environmental conditions are out of specified limits. So perhaps you, in your testing or calibration program protocol, you're required to list as to any predefined limits of acceptable environmental criteria. So let's say, for example, it was 20 degrees C plus or minus 4 degrees C, and it happened to be 6 degrees C out, and you proceeded with the calibration. It was not discovered until after the fact. That would be an example of non-conforming work. Or perhaps you do have checks on your balances where you have prior to doing a calibration or a test on this particular balance, you have test weights that you use. You have data on those test weights, and you have predefined limits of acceptance. An example there would be perhaps exceeding those predefined limits, and however, still producing reports to the customer despite the equipment being out of those predefined limits. So getting back to the requirements, the procedure shall ensure A, the responsibilities and authority for the management of non-conforming work are defined. So I have to specify some personnel there who's responsible for implementing this protocol. The procedure shall ensure B, actions, which includes the halting and repeating of work and withholding of reports as necessary or based upon the risk levels by the laboratory. So when you have a procedure, you should adopt in the procedure of non-conforming work handling to include different levels of risk, with the most severe having a direct adverse effect on customer reported results. For example, you can have them categorized such as acceptable, tolerable, undesirable, or intolerable, or some examples. C, the procedure shall ensure an evaluation is made on the significance of the non-conforming work, including an impact analysis on previous results. So, for example, on those out of tolerance conditions on the artifact that was sent in for calibration, did the as found data impact statements of compliance you may have made to the customer in the reports issued to them? That's when you stated perhaps a sample pass or a specific artifact was in tolerance, when in fact this out of tolerance condition, if incorporated into the test or calibration, may possibly jeopardize that from being true. So basically, go back, look at those pass-fail statements. This often implies something called reverse traceability, where you basically have to go back, look at the specific, in the case of the as found failures, the instrument that was out of calibration, and see basically what it was used for since the last time it was determined to be within tolerance. If you are perhaps doing equipment checks, and they're done on a weekly basis. Worst case scenario would be if you check it on a weekly basis, if it was within predefined limits, say you do it on every Monday, for example, run these QA checks, and you come back the following Monday and it was out of tolerance, then you would just have to go back that whole week since the last time it was found to be within the predefined limits of acceptance. So again, your procedure shall ensure that a decision is taken on the acceptability of the non-conforming work. Worst case scenario, E, the procedure shall ensure, E, where necessary, the customer is notified and work is recalled. So that would be if it was definitely impacted and the risk level was not tolerable, where you would have to recall that work. And then F, the responsibility for authorizing the resumption of work is defined. So in the example of the weekly checks on equipment, things were going fine every Monday, and then all of a sudden the equipment was out of spec. So work would stop. Perhaps the equipment would need to be serviced, looked at, repaired, recalibrated, whatever. But once that equipment was found to be operating within acceptable limits, someone along the line would have the responsibility of authorizing the resumption of work. And that would need to be defined, and the procedure should basically specify who that individual would be. And records. So when these events occur, the laboratory shall retain records of non-conforming work. Basically show that all those bullet points we went through under 7.10.1 has been done. And then last but not least, where the evaluation indicate that the non-conforming work could reoccur, or that there is doubt about the conformity of the laboratory's operation with its own management system, the laboratory shall implement corrective actions. So again, this is section 8.7. And if you were in tune with the corrective action webinar that we recently finished, which may have it's been within the last 2 months, one of the things when you take corrective action, you ideally want to get to the root cause, and that will prevent a reoccurrence. So an example would be perhaps a technician ran their weekly checks, and the equipment was out of predefined limits. However, testing and calibration was allowed to proceed. This would be a case where perhaps a corrective action protocol established within your quality management system wouldn't need to be implemented. All right, so we're going to move into the next topic, which is a short area in section 8.6, which is called improvements. So the laboratory shall identify and select opportunity for improvement and implement any necessary actions. So there's a note right under that requirement in the standard, which is additional information for clarification of this requirement. Operations for improvement can be identified through such things as review of operational procedure, the use of policies, overall objectives, audit results, corrective actions, management reviews, suggestions from personnel, risk assessment, analysis of data, or proficiency testing results. So if you think about it, these are all items that we have requirements incorporated within the 17025 2017 standards. So ideally, besides just going through the motions of meeting the requirement, because the standard specifies that there's shalls associated with it, and these are things that you have to do in order to comply with the standard. Also, perhaps to continue with your accredited status, that they will actually provide benefits to the organization and provide opportunities which can be identified. Second part of section A6 is feedback. And here's something that once in a while I'll come across and I'll hear, well, our customers will let us know. That's not what the standard says. The laboratory shall seek feedback. So that means you have to have a vehicle in place for actively seeking feedback, both positive and negative, from its customers. The feedback shall be analyzed, and this is one of the areas that you're going to look at during the management review. Might be a good opportunity to go back and analyze the feedback you received and use to improve the management system, laboratory activities, and customer services. So types of feedback include such things as probably the most popular and the thing that comes to mind first is customer surveys, communication records, and review of reports with customers. So again, this is something that your organization has to actively seek the feedback, and you want to make it work for you. So I mentioned surveys. everybody's getting bombarded with surveys. An example would be if you send out 200 surveys and you only get 2 back, chances are, yep, you went through the time and effort of seeking the feedback. However, it's not providing you any true benefit. There's other ways to do so. One item that I like to suggest, perhaps if you aren't getting good results from surveys, is to just create a record, actively perhaps follow up with a customer, call list. If you're out there doing on-site calibration or testing, things you'd want to know anyway. Touch bases with your customer, perhaps shortly after the technicians have left their facility. Make sure, hey, was our guys or gals there on time? Were they professional or courteous? Things you want to know anyway. And then perhaps, hey, did they go over the reports with you? Did they answer your questions? Things like that, and they may actually approve it. And I've had this, and I put this up here because I hear it often. Hey, we send out all these surveys and we're not getting anything back. And I sort of say, hey, there's other means of doing it. I'll come back later and do the assessment. And I can truly say that I've heard, hey, this works better. And we've actually got a lot of useful information in doing this. So thank you. That's going to conclude today's webinar. So right now, if you can give me a moment while things are fresh on your mind, and again, keep them pertaining to today's area. You can type in any questions and I'll try my best to answer them. So right now I'm not seeing any, so sometimes it takes a while for this to populate. So we'll see if we get anything. Okay, here we go. And like I tell you, folks, this is live. I'm reading these as they're submitted. This next one, I would say definitely yes. Laboratory personnel identifies an opportunity for improvement, but during the management review, it was determined that it is not feasible. Will this satisfy the shall, because this is about looking for opportunities, correct? Yes, I would say most definite. Again, ideally, we have a section on risk and opportunity. So, and that is an input for your management review. It might be a good time to capture that and perhaps elaborate as to why it would not be feasible. Perhaps there was a risk involved and it was determined, hey, that risk was too great for us to proceed. All right. I think that's it, folks. Hope I'm not missing anything here. I'm having a little trouble opening up my entire screen. All right. Well, hopefully I explained everything real well and there wasn't a whole lot of questions, or I certainly hope I didn't confuse anybody. But before I go, I want to first of all wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving this week. And actually, we're not going to get together until after the holidays, so happy holidays as well. When you come back from the holidays and before we start the new year, we're going to wrap things up with a look at Section 5.0 structural requirements in the 2017 SAS standard, which is Section 5.0. So again, appreciate everybody logging in, participating, and enjoy the rest of your day.